to, which when we're talking about training loads, is how do you utilize that in your coaching? 'Cause I'm assuming you're looking at how much training that they're actually doing, yes?
Yeah.
Do you look at trying to change their training loads each week by a certain percentage, or how do you structure it yourself?
Yeah, I know that people always talk about this concept of how you change loads no more than 10% per week and all this kind of thing. I think that that's only useful if you're using, probably a coaching or even like a periodization style that is more linear in nature.
Yeah, okay.
The application of volume. I don't tend to prescribe training in that way, so managing loads is not really something that I tend to have a massive amount of issues with, other than sometimes the intensity goes higher than you actually would like them to go. The thing that I tend to often be having to try and control is intensities, not volumes. So for me, I'm not necessarily measuring volumes. I'm probably measuring more a correlate of how much that volume is multiplied by the intensity that they worked at. Right?
Are you looking at that through some of the objective measures that you collect?
Yeah, it's I'm always collecting times for basically everything everyone does.
Sure.
I'm collecting distances if they're doing jumps. I'm collecting, in the gym, like what's happening with the actual force output or the power output that they're creating. So I'm seeing these measures and kind of getting an idea of if someone goes to a new level with a squat or they go to a new level in an 80-meter rep. That's time for me to start thinking about, do I need to manipulate what's happening with the amount of volume that I do on that day and then in the consequent days, weeks. It's one of those things. And something like the Megawave system has allowed me to really understand, okay, if someone goes to a really high level and you do a bit of volume of that, you're going to need to change things for a while. And there's a few interesting stories about that, and some of them they're almost like folklore, which I think is important to put out there because it's not something that you necessarily need to attach to. But if you speak to some of the coaches that work in those speed power events, they'll talk about concepts like if someone does quite a big, say, personal best, they may be struggling to be able to recover from, and they say central nervous system. I don't know that they're measuring these things. If they are using systems like we're starting to see be available, then maybe they are taking these measures. But I think it's a combination of biochemical markers that do change.
Yeah, which probably influence central system capacity.
Definitely. Yeah. But they talk about anywhere from 10 days up to sort of 21 days of reduced system function and output. And an example of that is, for those who are interested, I believe the talks are still up. There's a track coach in the UK called Steve Fudge, and he coached a guy called James DeSolu, who was a sprinter. And James had this history of lots of injuries, talented but lots of injuries, and the performance was sort of a bit all over the place. And they took this approach with him of they really reduced his volumes down and built him up really slowly and kind of attacked it in that manner. And they were able to get some really good performances out of him. One of them is, and it's still his he's retired now, but his PB, and he ran 9:91. And at the time, this was in 2013 that he did that, I believe. And what they did was they were measuring his testosterone and cortisol ratios using saliva testing at that time. But they weren't getting the results back for 2 or 3 weeks after the actual collection. And what they found was after he did that, his saliva readings didn't improve for about 3 weeks. And that's a hard thing because, one, you're not receiving the data straight away.
Yeah.
But two, if you go and have a performance like that, you sometimes have to consider, okay, well, did I place that in the correct sort of position with when I expose that athlete to that stressor? Before we mentioned opportunities and opportunity cost, it's like, be aware that if you expose someone to something that is new or really foreign or way beyond what they've done, what impact that might have. And it's not to say that you can't have someone run multiple personal bests and all that kind of thing in a season, or have multiple personal bests in the gym. What it means is you just need to be very aware of what you do around that and how you build them back up, because the stress that it does expose them to is quite significant, or maybe quite significant depending on the individual.